In the year 1492, as Christopher Columbus prepared to sail west into the unknown, another revolution was quietly waiting on the other side of the Atlantic. It wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it wasn't an empire, it was a small, fiery red pepper. Within a few decades, that pepper would completely transform one of Europe's oldest foods forever. But here's the strange part. For thousands of years before anyone had ever heard the word chorizo, people had already been trying to solve one impossible problem. How do you keep meat alive? Long after the animal is dead, without refrigerators, without electricity, without ice. One mistake meant starvation. One mistake meant disease. One mistake could wipe out an entire village. The answer they eventually discovered didn't just create a famous sausage. It helped feed armies, sustain kingdoms, cross oceans, and survive some of history's darkest centuries. Today, millions of people eat chorizo without giving it a second thought. But almost nobody knows that its story begins thousands of years before Spain even existed. And before this documentary ends, you'll understand why one simple sausage changed history forever. Before chorizo, there was fear. Imagine waking up nearly 10,000 years ago. You have no supermarket, no freezer, no canned food. You hunt an animal for one day. Your family celebrates by the third day. The meat begins to smell by the fifth. Flies cover it within a week. Eating it could kill you. For early humans, hunting wasn't the hardest part. Keeping the food edible was. And that's why historians believe food preservation became one of humanity's first great scientific discoveries. Long before writing, long before mathematics, long before cities, people were already experimenting. Some buried meat beneath cold earth. Some hung it over smoky fires. Others covered it with enormous amounts of salt. Most experiments failed. Many probably ended with entire families becoming sick. But slowly, generation after generation, people learned something extraordinary. Salt could pull moisture out of meat. Smoke could keep insects away. Dry air could stop bacteria from growing. Without understanding microbiology, they had accidentally discovered food science. And those discoveries would eventually change civilization itself. The empire that fed itself fast forward thousands of years. The Mediterranean world is no longer filled with tiny villages. A new power dominates everything. Rome, the Roman Empire, stretched across 3 continents. Millions of soldiers had to be fed. Every campaign required enormous supplies of food. Fresh meat spoiled too quickly. Grain alone wasn't enough. The Romans needed protein that could survive weeks, sometimes months, without going bad. Their answer wasn't chorizo. Not yet. Every object has a story. Subscribe to discover the next one. Like, share, and I'll see you in the next documentary. Instead, Roman butchers began producing salted sausages using pork, herbs, garlic, wine and spices available throughout the empire. Some were smoked, others were air-dried. Many were stuffed into cleaned animal intestines. The casing protected the meat. Salt protected the inside. Dry air completed the process. These early sausages could travel incredible distances compared to fresh meat. Roman legions carried preserved meat across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Every successful military campaign spread new cooking techniques. Every conquered region added local ingredients. Slowly, the sausage itself evolved, but despite all this innovation, one thing was still missing: its color. Because every sausage in Europe looked almost exactly the same. Gray, brown, or pale, the famous deep red color that defines chorizo today didn't exist. Not because people didn't want it, because the ingredient simply didn't exist. Yet, a kingdom falls, but the sausage lives in AD 476. The Western Roman Empire collapsed. Cities burned, trade routes disappeared, roads fell apart. Europe entered centuries historians would later call the Middle Ages. For ordinary people, life became dramatically harder. Long-distance trade almost vanished. Food shortages became common. Winters felt longer. Harvest failures became deadlier. But one Roman invention refused to disappear: preserved sausage. Monasteries continued making them. Village butchers protected old recipes. Farmers raised pigs because pigs could survive where cattle often couldn't. Unlike cows, pigs could eat scraps. They grew quickly, and nearly every part of the animal could be used. Nothing was wasted. Fat became cooking oil. Skin became leather. Bones became tools. Blood became food. Meat became preserved sausage. Across medieval Europe, the pig slowly became the most valuable farm animal. Not because it produced the most meat, because it wasted almost nothing. And nowhere embraced the pig more passionately than the Iberian Peninsula, the land we now know as Spain and Portugal. The land that changed everything centuries before Spain became a united kingdom. The Iberian Peninsula was divided into dozens of kingdoms. Christians ruled parts of the north. Muslim rulers controlled much of the south. Jewish communities flourished in major cities. Cultures mixed, languages mixed, receipts mixed. Markets overflowed with unfamiliar spices arriving from North Africa and the Middle East: garlic, cumin, black pepper, coriander. These ingredients slowly transformed local cooking. Pork sausages became more aromatic, more complex, more sophisticated. But something unexpected was also happening. Because religion was beginning to shape food itself. Muslims avoided pork. Jewish dietary law also prohibited pork. Christians openly consumed it. Over time, pork became more than food. It became an identity. Eating pork publicly became a visible symbol of belonging. Something as simple as a sausage could reveal who you were. And sometimes, whether you lived or died, as religious conflicts intensified across medieval Spain, food stopped being just food. It became politics. It became culture. It became survival. But the greatest transformation was still waiting across an ocean nobody in Europe had crossed. The voyage that changed every kitchen. 492, 1 year. One voyage, one decision. Christopher Columbus sailed west searching for Asia. Instead, Europe encountered an entirely different world. Among the countless plants returning from the Americas, tomatoes, potatoes, maize, cocoa, vanilla, and one tiny pepper, capsicum. At first, Europeans barely noticed it. Black pepper remained expensive. The new peppers looked strange. Some were incredibly hot, others surprisingly sweet. Monks began growing them inside monastery gardens. Farmers experimented with drying them. Then someone made an accidental discovery. When fully dried, the peppers could be ground into an incredibly fine powder. Bright red. Deeply aromatic, easy to store, easy to transport, the spice became known as paprika. Nobody realized it immediately. But this single ingredient was about to reinvent one of Europe's oldest foods forever. Because paprika didn't only add flavor, it changed color. It added natural antioxidants. It helped protect meat, and suddenly, those old gray Roman sausages were turning brilliant shades of red. For the first time in history, something that looked remarkably like modern chorizo finally appeared. The birth of chorizo. Historians believe recognizable Spanish chorizo emerged during the 16th century. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Paprika had arrived. Pig farming was flourishing. Salt production had improved. Air drying techniques had become more reliable. Everything finally came together. Pork, garlic, salt, paprika natural casing. The ingredients sound simple today. But together, they created something completely different from every sausage that had come before. The color immediately stood out. The aroma became unmistakable. The flavor balanced smoky richness with gentle heat. Each village developed its own recipe. Some preferred sweet paprika, others used hot varieties, some smoked their sausages. Others dried them in mountain air. No single recipe existed, only tradition, and tradition spread quickly. Within decades, red sausages became increasingly common throughout Spain. But while ordinary families celebrated this delicious invention, a darker chapter of history was unfolding, because this wasn't just the age of exploration. It was also the age of the Spanish Inquisition. And incredibly, even a sausage could become evidence against you. When the Spanish Inquisition reached its height, people feared many things: the knock on the door, anonymous accusations, accurate investigations, but very few people realize even food could become evidence. Imagine living in Spain during the late 15th and early 16th centuries. Thousands of Jews and Muslims had officially converted to Christianity. Many did so willingly. Others had little choice. These converts became known as conversos and moriscos. The church constantly questioned whether their conversions were genuine. And strangely enough, one of the easiest ways to test someone's loyalty wasn't through prayer. It was through dinner. Pork became more than meat. It became proof. Families proudly hung sausages outside their homes. Taverns displayed cured pork where everyone could see it. Public feasts revolved around roasted pigs and cured meats. Refusing pork invited suspicion. Accepting it demonstrated loyalty. History rarely remembers this chapter when talking about chorizo. Yet for thousands of ordinary people, a simple sausage represented safety, or danger, identity, or persecution. Food had become politics. A perfect climate while religion shaped its meaning. Nature perfected its flavor. Spain possessed something unique: dry mountain air, cool nights, warm afternoons, low humidity. These conditions were almost perfect for curing meat naturally. Northern regions developed slow air-drying traditions. Western farmers smoked their sausages using oak wood. Central Spain relied on cold winter winds. Every region believed its own method was superior, and perhaps every region was right, because chorizo wasn't created in one workshop. It evolved in hundreds of villages simultaneously. Families protected recipes like family treasures. Some added extra garlic. Others preferred smoky paprika. Some ground meat finely. Others chopped it by hand. Each recipe carried generations of experience. Every slice told a family's story. The black pig's butt, another extraordinary discovery, changed everything. Not every pig tasted the same. Spanish farmers noticed certain black pigs roaming oak forests developed incredibly rich meat, unlike ordinary pigs. These animals spent months eating fallen acorns. The acorns slowly transformed the fat inside their bodies. Instead of hard white fat, their meat became beautifully marbled, soft, nutty, almost buttery. The pigs walked for kilometers every day searching for food. That exercise strengthened muscle, improved texture, deepened flavor. Generations of selective breeding eventually created one of the world's most famous animals, the Iberian pig, even today. Many of Spain's finest chorizos begin with these remarkable animals. But centuries ago, farmers didn't understand chemistry. They simply knew one thing. Pigs raised in oak forests tasted unforgettable. Sometimes, experience discovers science centuries before science explains experience. The spice worth more than gold, although paprika had transformed chorizo forever. It wasn't immediately cheap. In the 16th century, spices remained luxury items. Merchants crossed dangerous seas. Bandits attacked caravans. Storms destroyed ships. Every successful delivery increased fortunes. Paprika gradually became easier to grow than expensive black pepper imported from Asia. Spanish monasteries experimented with cultivation. Farmers improved drying methods. Soon, nearly every village produced its own paprika. Some dried peppers beneath the sun, others smoked them over oak fires. That simple difference created entirely different flavors. Sweet, smoky, mild, fiery. Every harvest tasted slightly different, and every year's chorizo carried the signature of that season. Crossing the Atlantic, Spain's empire stretched across the oceans. Ships sailed constantly between Europe and the Americas. They carried soldiers, missionaries, merchants, farm animals, seeds, recipes. Among those recipes traveled chorizo, but history has a habit of changing everything it touches. Spanish settlers reached Mexico, the Caribbean, Peru, Argentina, Chile. Each region welcomed the sausage, then reinvented it. Mexicans introduced local chilies. Argentinians preferred fresh chorizo cooked over open flames. Portuguese traders created their own cousin, chorizo. South America blended European traditions with indigenous ingredients. One recipe became dozens, then hundreds. Today, almost every Latin American country claims its own version. Each insists theirs is authentic. Each has centuries of tradition supporting that belief. The truth is, they're all part of the same remarkable family. Feeding and empires don't survive on luxury foods. They survive on practical ones. Spanish explorers crossing unknown lands couldn't carry fresh meat. It spoiled too quickly. Cured chorizo solved that problem. It traveled well, needed no refrigeration. Contained enormous amounts of energy. A small piece could sustain a traveler for hours. Sailors packed barrels filled with preserved meat before crossing the Atlantic. Soldiers carried sausages during long military campaigns. Farmers relied on them throughout harsh winters. For ordinary families, the annual pig slaughter became one of the most important days of the year. Nothing was wasted. Fresh cuts were eaten immediately. The rest became hams, bacon, lard, and chorizo. Those sausages hanging from kitchen ceilings represented something priceless. Security, every link promised another meal during difficult months. Every successful curing season meant another year of survival. The secret ingredient was never paprika. Most people believe paprika made chorizo famous. They're only partly correct. The real secret was patience. Fresh sausage tastes good. Cured sausage transforms completely. During weeks, sometimes months. Moisture slowly leaves the meat. Flavors become concentrated. Natural fermentation develops complexity impossible to create overnight. Time itself becomes an ingredient. Praster butchers understood this instinctively. They inspected every sausage daily, feeling its firmness, watching color changes, smelling tiny differences. One mistake could ruin hundreds of kilograms of meat. One successful season earned respect throughout the village. Becoming a master sausage maker required decades. There were no written manuals. Knowledge passed from father to son, mother to daughter, nesulation after generation. Long before culinary schools existed, entire families became living libraries of food science. A new challenge by the 18th century. Chorizo had become one of Spain's defining foods, but the world was changing faster than ever before. Steam engines appeared. Factories expanded. Cities exploded in size. Millions abandoned farms searching for work. Traditional village life began disappearing. And with it, ancient food traditions faced their greatest threat. Could something created slowly by hand survive the Industrial Revolution? Or would history leave chorizo behind forever? The answer would surprise everyone. The 19th century changed everything. Factories replaced family workshops. Railroads replaced horse caravans. Steamships crossed oceans faster than ever before. And millions of people left quiet villages for crowded industrial cities. For centuries, most families had made their own chorizo. Now, many no longer had pigs. They no longer had smokehouses. They no longer had months to cure meat by hand. For the first time, people began buying chorizo instead of making it. What had once been a family tradition slowly became an industry. But there was a problem. Traditional chorizo depended on nature. Cold winters, dry mountain air, perfect humidity. Factories couldn't wait for the weather. They needed consistency. Scientists and food producers began studying the curing process that village butchers had perfected over centuries. They measured temperature, humidity, airflow, salt concentration, bacterial fermentation. Without realizing it, those old village recipes had become the foundation of modern food science. The Industrial Revolution by the early 20th century. Spain's sausage industry had expanded dramatically. Regional producers began shipping chorizo across Europe. Railroads carried products that once could travel only a few kilometers. Markets grew larger. Competition became stronger. Every producer claimed their recipe was the original. Every town believed its chorizo was the finest. Some protected recipes like national treasures. Others modernized production. Yet despite machines entering the process, one thing never changed. Quality still depended on patience. No machine could replace time. The two chorizos today. Millions of people believe there is only one kind of chorizo. There isn't. Walk into a market in Madrid. You'll usually find cured Spanish chorizo firm. Dry ready to slice immediately. No cooking required. Travel thousands of kilometers west to Mexico. You'll discover something completely different. Mexican chorizo is soft, fresh, rich, with vinegar and local chilies. It must be cooked before eating. Same name. Completely different experience. Then travel south. Argentina, Uruguay, Chile. Each country proudly serves its own version. Usually grilled over charcoal. Often inside fresh bread. Shared among friends during long afternoon barbecues. One ancient recipe. Hundreds of modern identities. History rarely creates exact copies. It creates families. Protected by tradition as global demand increased. Imitations appeared everywhere. Factories copied famous regional names. Cheaper ingredients replaced traditional ones. Local producers fought back eventually. Several regions received official geographical protection. Only chorizo, produced under strict traditional rules, could carry certain regional names. It wasn't about marketing. It was about preserving centuries of history, protecting local farmers, protecting craftsmanship, protecting culture itself, because losing an old recipe doesn't simply erase food, it erases memory. The science hidden inside. Every slice most people taste chorizo. Few understand what they're actually tasting. During curing, thousands of microscopic changes occur. Beneficial bacteria begin breaking down proteins. Natural enzymes transform fats into aromatic compounds. Moisture slowly disappears. Flavors become concentrate. The garlic softens. The paprika deepens. The meat develops incredible complexity. What seems simple is actually controlled biology, centuries before microbiologists existed. Spanish butchers had mastered fermentation simply through observation. If one room was too warm, the meat spoiled. If humidity remained too high, mold spread. If salt levels were incorrect, everything failed. Generation after generation, experience became science. Without laboratories, without textbooks, without microscopes. A global icon today. Chorizo is no longer just Spanish. It belongs to the world. You'll find it in restaurants across Europe, street food markets in Latin America, luxury hotels in Asia, family kitchens in North America, barbecues in Australia. Millions of kilograms are produced every year. Yet, despite all this success, traditional villages in Spain still celebrate annual pig slaughter festivals. Families still gather together. Grandparents still teach grandchildren recipes that have survived for hundreds of years. Some traditions refuse to disappear. And perhaps that's exactly why chorizo survived when countless other medieval foods vanished. It adapted without forgetting where it came from. Myths and misunderstandings. Many people believe chorizo has always been red. It hasn't. For thousands of years, it wasn't. Paprika completely changed its appearance after the Columbian exchange. Others believe chorizo was invented by one famous chef. History tells a different story. No single person created it. Thousands of anonymous farmers, butchers, monks, families, and craftsmen slowly shaped it across centuries. The true inventor was time itself. More than food. When historians study wars, they examine weapons. When they study kings, they read royal documents. But sometimes, the most important stories are hidden inside ordinary meals. A sausage hanging from a farmhouse ceiling. A recipe whispered from grandmother to granddaughter. A tradition repeated every winter. These quiet moments rarely appear in history books, yet they shaped civilizations. Chorizo wasn't merely something people ate. It represented preparation, community, celebration, survival. Every successful curing season meant another winter conquered, another family protected, another year endured. The legacy think back to where this story began, thousands of years ago. Hunters simply wanted meat that wouldn't rot. The Romans improved preservation. Medieval farmers protected the knowledge. The discovery of paprika transformed everything. Spanish villages perfected the recipe. Explorers carried it across oceans. Immigrants spread it around the world. Factories modernized production. Scientists finally explained what traditional craftsmen already understood. Today, a child eating a slice of chorizo in Madrid, a family grilling chorizo in Buenos Aires, a street vendor cooking Mexican chorizo in Mexico City, are all connected by a story stretching back thousands of years. Few foods can claim such a remarkable journey, from survival to identity, from necessity to tradition, from medieval villages to supermarket shelves across the globe. That is the true history of chorizo, not simply the history of a sausage, but the history of human ingenuity. Because every slice reminds us of something our ancestors learned long ago. Food isn't just about eating. Sometimes, it is about surviving long enough to build civilizations. And sometimes, the greatest stories in history are hiding on our dinner plates. The end.